Welcome to Sociology 1. Little heads up in this class. Not this Wednesday. We'll come to class normally on this Wednesday. But the following Wednesday, Wednesday the 19th, we're having another event having to do with the election. So that's the day of the final debate between the candidates. So from 6 to 8, we'll have another debate watching party in the theater. But during the day, from 2 to 5, we're having an open mic for voters. So that'll be in the theater too, and that will involve anybody who wants to can get up and say whatever they want for up to 10 minutes related to political issues. So especially local issues is what we're hoping people will talk about. Local candidates, local measures that are on the ballot, including Measure Q, which affects funding for Yuba College. So lots of things for people to be talking about there. And if you want extra credit for this class, attending, you can get extra credit if you turn in a paper and talk about what you saw and heard at any part of the event, whether the open mic or the later debate. And there'll be an open mic after the debate as well in the theater. In between, there's going to be free dinner. So if you come, you can get free food before the debate. But you can also get extra credit if you speak. If you get up and do 10 minutes, I'll give you extra credit just for doing that. So please try to come to the event. But since it starts at 2 o'clock, 2 to 5 is the open mic. I won't be here. I'm going to be over there. So I think what I'm going to actually ask is that this class meet at least from 2 to 2:30 or 2:45 in the, we start here at 2:30. So if you could be there from 2:30 to 3:45 at least at the open mic. You can listen to other people talking, and it'll definitely relate to sociology because it's all about this community and also the larger national community and state. So that's where we'll be meeting in the theater next, not this Wednesday, Wednesday the 19th. Is that clear? And it's all part of what's called the October Voter Fest, and my class, Sociology 2, is putting on this event. We got a grant, or the school got a grant for $10,000 from the Community College Foundation to promote voter registration. The other thing is if you're not registered to vote, I don't think I can give you extra credit for that, but you definitely should be registered to vote, and that's one of the reasons we're having the event, and we will have all the resources you need there to get registered even online if that's the way you want to do it. All right, well, in here we're talking about not politics but religion, and obviously those two things are supposed to be separate in American culture, at least in terms of our government. But we were talking about Durkheim's analysis of religion. So we were talking about the elementary forms of religious life. And we're talking about Durkheim, and the reason we're talking about Durkheim is, well, we're talking about functionalism in general, but functionalism has a lot to say about religion, and we were comparing Durkheim's views on religion to those of Karl Marx. As we said, Karl Marx saw religion as a tool that the dominant classes use to maintain their dominance over the subordinated classes. They make people believe that religion is the right thing to believe in, not revolution or anything like that. And Durkheim disagreed with this view of religion because he didn't think you could just impose religion on people from above, or maybe you could, but that's not where religion comes from. According to him, if we're going to ask about these functions of religion, we need to think about why do groups create that, the group functions of religious belief and practice. So the group functions of religion. And as we were talking about, he tried to answer this question by going back to the earliest forms of religion. Before there was Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, before any of those, there were groups of human beings, and they had religious belief. And he asked, well, what function did those serve? And the kinds he was talking about, I won't go back over the whole lecture, but we tried to imagine how did those first beliefs start happening. And as we pointed out, they had to do with something Durkheim calls collective effervescence. It's this group power of people. And I think we described it the other day. When people get together and they do things as a group, like chanting or singing or drumming or dancing, they can begin to achieve this bubbly feeling, this group effervescence, collective effervescence, where people feel like there's magical powers in that group power. And in Durkheim's view, that's the beginning of religion, is human beings realizing that groups, as a group of human beings, they have power that they don't have as individuals. And they begin creating representations of that power. Collective representations is the term he uses, where the group creates images and symbols and other things that help them recognize that power and celebrate it and even worship it. And these early religions were totemic religions. A totem is usually a natural symbol. You've probably heard of totem poles. In the Northwest, the Indian tribes of the Northwest often make these totem poles. How many have ever heard of a totem pole? It's a pole with a bunch of animals' heads, basically, or other animal symbols. And they typically represented each tribe in a clan of tribes. So you might have like the eagle clan and the bear clan and different clans. And a lot of people at the time of Durkheim interpreted that to mean that these early humans were worshiping animals. And from a Christian standpoint, that meant they were heathens and they were worshiping things they shouldn't worship because they were worshiping animals. But Durkheim turns that around and says they're not really worshiping animals. If they're worshiping these natural symbols, like the bear or the eagle, they're not really worshiping that. What they're really worshiping is collective effervescence. It's their group power that the bear symbolizes or the eagle symbolizes. And in celebrating that animal and its symbolic significance, they're celebrating themselves. They're saying we as a group have this amazing power when we do our group rituals. And the bear, maybe we associate with that power, but we're not worshiping the bear, we're worshiping our collective power, our group power. And Durkheim carries this further and says, well, when people have abstract symbols, when they're able to say that this thing stands for this bear or this feather stands for us over here. Well, that's abstract thought. That's being able to say life isn't just what's right in front of us, this rock, this feather, this tree. There's also this kind of other realm, this magical, sacred realm as we talked about it. And sometimes we have to symbolize that sacred realm. We can't see it and touch it and feel it, but we can make symbols of it and pay attention to those symbols. And if we've got symbolic thinking, symbols in our heads, symbolic representation of the world, well, then we're actually capable of thinking reasonable thoughts. In other words, he's actually saying here, he's trying to make an argument that for Marx, as we saw, religion is the opposite of science. In his view, science is rational thinking, it's reason, it's rationality. And in his view, Marx, human beings should give up religion because that's a false way of thinking. That's a untrue understanding of the world. And science gives us a true understanding of the world. And in his view, the conflict theory, the ideas we talked about earlier in this class, like the working class coming together and overthrowing capitalism, in his view, that was just science proving that, not some religious belief about what should happen in the future. And Durkheim's saying, well, religion and science aren't really opposite things. Human beings somehow had to learn how to think with reason and rationality. And how do you do that? You have to have abstract symbols. You have to have abstract thinking. And the very first abstract thinking in human history was religious thinking, thinking about this sacred realm and symbolizing it. And so he's trying to say without religion, we wouldn't be able to think rationally. So they're not opposite things. And science really, what is science? It's a collective representation of the universe. And we imagine, in our current scientific thinking, there was this little ball of energy, and it exploded, and it created all the stars and, planets, and we're in that reality still. And so, if you've studied science, it represents the world. We weren't there to see the Big Bang and things, but it's a way of thinking about who are we, where do we fit in the larger picture of the universe, where are we going? In that sense, it's a lot like religion. Religion represents the world. It tells people who are we, where do we fit in the planet, or where do we fit in life, and where are we going, and all those things. And so science is just the latest version of what humanity's always been doing. Ever since the beginning, humans have tried to figure out, who are we? Where do we fit in the larger picture? And they've tried to represent that with abstract symbols. And so, but the problem is, for our current world, in the modern world, these early religions, they're gone. I mean, those tribes long ago ceased to be distinct groups and joined other groups and became new things. And so now we have things like Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddhism and Sikhism. And the current religions we have, they're representations, they're collective representations of specific groups. Like, who are the Jews? We are these people. Who are the Christians? Who are the Sikhs? Who are the Buddhists? And for groups in an earlier time, before humanity was modern, in today's world, in the modern world, he says, we're all one group. The modern world, humanity is one single group, really. We're all connected on planet Earth, and we all depend on each other. Or at least you could say that about a big society like France. It's all one group. And even though you had Jews and Christians and Buddhists and other different groups in France, really, sociologically speaking, it's all one group. But the problem is, because people have these older group representations of who they are, they don't really see themselves connected to the other French people. Oh, I'm a Jewish person. I'm a Muslim. France is still dealing with this problem, by the way. They had a big debate earlier this summer where France said, if you're a woman and you wear, hijab, you're Muslim and you wear a head covering, headscarf, you can't go on the beach with the headscarf. And a lot of the French people said, well, that's weird because we're a country that believes in freedom. We had a revolution about that, so why are we telling Muslim women they can't wear a headscarf? And in fact, somebody pointed out, well, Catholic nuns, they wear habits, they wear head coverings, and they're allowed on the beach in France. So why are we telling Muslim women they can't? And the law got repealed. But anyway, France is still dealing with that question. If we want to be unified as a country, can we also have different religions? Because religions are, the function of them is to hold a group together and make it feel connected and feel like we want to help each other out. And if we have separate religions within a national society like France or the United States, we may have conflict over those things because we're thinking of ourselves as separate groups rather than as one people all connected. And so Durkheim actually says these old religions aren't functional anymore. They're preventing humanity from functioning together as the one group that it is, because people's mind is still stuck in who they used to be. And Jews aren't really Jews anymore, and Christians aren't really Christians anymore. In sociological terms, we're all one tribe. So we need, this tribe that we're part of, humanity, needs a religion that it doesn't have right now. It's got a bunch of old religions from the past. And so the function of religion, we could say, is to provide social solidarity. It's to provide a sense of a picture in your mind of how the universe works, a picture in your mind of what group you're a part of and how you fit in to that larger universe. And I'm just going to abbreviate all that and say that the function of religion is group social solidarity, holding a group together, keeping it on the same page. And that's what we're missing in today's modern world. We are a group, but we're a group that doesn't see itself that way and doesn't feel connected to each other and doesn't share the same collective representations of how we can all fit together and work together. Remember, we said Durkheim was worried about this complex division of labor. So we all go off and do our own things every day, our own jobs. We depend on each other because if dentists aren't in the world, then I can't get my teeth cleaned. And if there aren't steel workers, then dentists don't have steel tools to clean my teeth. I mean, we all need each other in the modern complex economy, but we don't necessarily feel connected in the ways like, that's my brother, I would go to bat for him, I would die for that guy. Religions help people feel connected in that way. And so that's what we seem to be missing. He actually thought that science could be the collective representation of humanity as a whole. So if you ask, well, how does humanity figure out who is humanity? What is the human race? How does it fit in the universe? Well, science provides a lot of interesting answers to those questions, and if human beings could all agree on science being the way to answer those questions, it would serve the same function that religion always has a set of collective representations about how the planet, about who we are, where we fit, how we all are connected. And ultimately, though, those sets of beliefs need norms. They need sets of ideas about what's right or what's wrong. What's the right way to do things? What's the wrong way to do things? And science doesn't really have that. Science is just a method for answering questions about how the universe works. It doesn't really tell us what's the right way to act or the wrong way to act. And in Durkheim's time, there was no such thing as sociology. But he actually thought sociology, if we could develop this new science of society, that could be like the secular religion. It could be a religion for humanity that wasn't religious, that wasn't about supernatural things like unseen beings, like God and angels and stuff. But it would still be a set of beliefs that unite us, that tell us where we fit, that gives us a sense of norms in terms of what's right or what's wrong. And sociology, by focusing on society, shows people how they're connected. It can help show the steel worker how he's connected to the dentist, and the dentist is connected to the sociologist. And it would give us a sense of why we should, treat each other right, why we should pay each other decent wages, why we should make sure we have good retirements and good healthcare systems and things like that. And if we could feel more connected to each other, we wouldn't have the kind of presidential debate that we had last night, for example, where people are hating on each other and vilifying each other. Instead, we'd be all agreeing on the basic things of life and then trying to figure out what's the best way to get these things done. But we're clearly a divided society in conflict with itself. And Marx points that out. But Durkheim thinks what's really missing is a morality that unites us all. And he thinks sociology might provide the basis for that. But remember, he was writing in the 1800s. Before there was sociology. We have it now. I don't know if it's solving the problems the way he thought it could. But this work of his, by the way, you can see how it maybe ties in with symbolic interactionism. He's the father of functionalism. But in his latest work, as he was finishing up his career writing about religion, he began to talk a lot about the importance of symbols for orienting human beings and relating to each other. And a lot of that work is actually more used in symbolic interactionism now than it is in functionalism. So in some ways, he was the father of functionalism, but as he matured and grew as a sociologist, his work shifted more towards symbolic interactionism. In some ways, he's the father of that, one of the fathers of that perspective as well. But what about Weber? Max Weber is the third major sociologist you've learned about. And I'm running out of pens here to write with, as usual. Now, I want to start off by pointing out that Weber, as he liked to do, basically say, well, both Marx and Durkheim are wrong, and I've got the right answer. And so even though Marx and Durkheim are like on the opposite sides of things in a way, there's one thing they share in common. Marx and Durkheim are basically saying that religion is conservative. Religion is a conservative force. I don't mean politically conservative, although it often is. I mean sociologically conservative, meaning it holds society together. It preserves society. It conserves it. It means it prevents change, in other words. Both Marx and Durkheim seem to agree on that. Marx says it prevents change because it keeps the same people in power and keeps things going how they are and prevents the powerless from challenging the status quo. So Marx sees religion as a conservative force in that sense, and a politically conservative force because it keeps the same people in power. Durkheim says it prevents change because it holds us all together. It keeps us all thinking alike, feeling connected to each other, so it keeps us from having too much conflict and doing things too much differently than we've always done them. It helps us maintain tradition and maintain belief systems and keep things going how they've always been. Gives us things to teach to our children so that they'll maintain the things that we believed in. So you could see religion as something that keeps society going how it's always been. But Weber starts his analysis by asserting that religion also can do the opposite of that. Religion at times in human history, Weber says, that religion is a radical force, meaning it causes major change in society. That if you look back on human history, thank you, she's giving me a good pen. I could write on the little, I don't know if you liked it when I wrote on the screen. I guess I could switch over to that. Religion, this says, is a radical force. So not a conservative force. This one says conservative. Marx and Weber, Marx and Durkheim do. And Weber says, no, it can be quite radical. Radical in the sense of causing major change. Just to give you an example of what we're talking about. The Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King, caused major change in the United States. They challenged the laws of our country and challenged ways of doing things. Now that was a religious-based movement. The people in the movement, the leaders of it, were like Martin Luther King, a reverend, a religious figure. And the people met to have their meetings and plan their actions and plan their protests in churches. So could you really say that Southern churches were a conservative force that maintained America how it always was? Or would it be more accurate to say they were the seeds of a radical movement that challenged American society? And even right now, some of the most radical people that want change in America are evangelical Christians that say America's way on the wrong track and we got to do things much differently than we're doing right now. So I'm just giving you some reasons to maybe pay attention to Weber's view that religion doesn't just keep things how they always were. It isn't just traditional. It can sometimes be pushing for totally new ways of doing things. And Weber's analysis helps us see that. So that's where he's coming from, and that's one of the main differences between these founding fathers on their views of religion. But Weber wrote a famous book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. It's one of the more famous books in the founding of sociology, and it made a name for Weber. And by the way, he wrote this book. There was a time when Weber was very depressed, we now know. He spent about 7 years just sitting in a chair, looking out the window of his house, and people wondered what happened to Weber, because he had been a very driven guy before that. He was trying really hard in law and scholarship and working very long hours, and very driven guy to succeed. And then all of a sudden he gets to a point in his life where he didn't want to do anything. He just sat in a chair all day. And then he wakes up out of his kind of stupor, out of his depression, and writes this famous book, Protestant Ethic and Spirit of Capitalism. And so I think, my own theory is, he was depressed about the state of the world and about, as a young man, what can you do with your life on planet Earth? And he sat there thinking about that for 7 years and then writes a book about it. And so what's this book about? Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but he wants to understand basically the founding of America. Who were the Protestants? He's talking about the Puritans. The Puritans are the people that we celebrate on Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims that came over and wear the black and white clothes and the wooden shoes, and they settled America. Well, the Indians already settled here, but they settled after them. And they came to this country because of religious persecution. They were part of a religious movement called Calvinism. And Calvinism was what you could call a radical sect. A sect is a piece of a religion. So you have overall Christianity, which includes Catholicism and Protestantism. Protestantism is a splinter off of Catholicism and created its own version of Christianity. And then within Protestantism, you have a lot of different sects, like Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians and others. And Calvinism was a radical sect of Protestantism. And they weren't well liked in England, where they lived. And they got booted out and moved to Netherlands for a while, and then they eventually came here because the King of England said, I'll let you practice Calvinism all you want in America if you want. And so what is Calvinism? And Weber's unique thing was to say, if we look at the beliefs, the spirit of Calvinism, then we can see a lot of why America is the way it is today. And so he's trying to say, he's again arguing with Marx. Marx, if you recall, was a materialist who said what makes societies what they are is how things are made and how people do things. It's not their beliefs that shape how they do things, it's how they do things that shapes their beliefs. But Weber's offering a different view here and saying it was the beliefs of the Calvinists that turned America into what it is. And today there are no more Calvinists in his, that people going around saying they're a Calvinist, and yet their beliefs are still with us because he's arguing that this work ethic, the Protestant ethic, another word for it, we would call it the work ethic. This idea that you're supposed to work hard. And if you don't work hard, you are a sinner. You are being lazy. You're being a bad person if you don't wake up early, work hard, and make as much money as possible. That, you could say, is the main American belief. And we get mad at people who won't get up and start doing their work, and we say people who aren't making money, there's something wrong with them. They must not be virtuous. They must not be blessed by God. There must be something wrong with them. And these beliefs are still with us in America in terms of valuing hard work and valuing wealth. And so Weber asked, well, where did these beliefs come from? What did they mean to the Calvinists, and how did it create a whole new society? He's basically saying the beliefs they had created a whole new type of society, and the rest of the world really has had to become like America. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but what are their beliefs? He said they had certain core beliefs. And if you understand their core beliefs, you can understand why they lived the way they did, and then you can understand how they began to shape our country and the world. One of their core beliefs, and one of the more controversial ones, and why they were vilified, the Calvinists, why people didn't necessarily want them around, they believed in predestination, the doctrine of predestination. And that's the idea that God has already chosen who gets to go to heaven. While God was creating the universe, according to Calvinists, he already made a list of who's going to heaven and who isn't. And it's all already predetermined, it's predestined. And there's nothing you can do about it. According to Calvin, it doesn't matter how good of a person you are. You can help old ladies across the street all you want. You could donate all your money to charity. That's not going to get you into heaven, because that's not what decides it. What decides it is God, and he decided it a long time ago. And you're either in it or you're out. And basically, most of us are out. According to him, there's only an elect, the elect. That's another word for the chosen, that get to go to heaven. And the rest of us are not. And you might as well get used to that idea. And so that's a pretty dark view. According to most Christians, all you have to do is, have a good relationship with God and Jesus and, confess your sins and things like that. And if you do that, you'll get to heaven. But according to Calvinists, no, you may never. Most of us never will. So that's a pretty harsh belief. Another idea of it, though, was the idea that God also decided for you, before you were born, what you're meant to do here on earth. That everybody has a certain calling. That God already decided early on in life, before you were born even, well before you were ever born, ever got here, what your role in creation is. And according to the Calvinists, that's our job as individuals, is to help God create the universe. That God is still creating the universe as we're in it, and we are the ones making it happen. And so the things we do here on earth are part of God's plan. But you don't have a little label on you when you come out of your mom's womb that says, here's what your calling is. Here's what you're supposed to be doing in life. I didn't have a little label that said sociologist on it. And you didn't either. So you have to look for signs. You don't know what your calling is, in other words. You've got to pay attention to the signs. According to Calvinism, God will give you signs of things that you should be. Like maybe there's things you're really good at that you're just better than other people at. Maybe there's things you just really love doing that you love more than other people do. Maybe there's certain things that just give you a tremendous amount of joy and satisfaction. And maybe those are signs that God's giving you that that's what you're meant to do. Like maybe you just love the smell of leather and you just always find yourself staring at people's feet and just thinking about how you could make a better shoe than the one they're wearing and how poorly designed their shoe is. Maybe God is telling you, you really ought to think about being a shoemaker because that's what you're really into and you're going to shine at it. And your calling is to do the best you can do at your calling. You need to have total devotion to your calling. If you want to be a good Calvinist or a good Christian, according to Calvin, you have to devote yourself to your calling. What does that mean? Well, start doing it now. Start getting good at it. When you are good at it, get up every morning as early as you can and start doing it, and do it as late as you can in the day. And devote yourself totally to that calling. That's your calling. That's what God wants you to do. So that's how you do what you're supposed to do here on earth, is do your calling. And the signs, by the way, we might not know if we're getting into heaven, and you won't know until you die. But according to the Calvinist way of thinking, there might be signs that you are blessed. There might be signs that you are among the chosen. If, for example, you really do well at your calling, and you become quite wealthy at your calling, that might be a sign that God has blessed you and you're among the elite and the elect and you might be destined for heaven. So that's another good reason to devote yourself to your calling, because if you become wealthy at it, at least that might be a sign, and maybe other people will take it as a sign, and it's just a good idea to be successful at your calling and not put it off or blow it off or whatever. And the final core belief he points to is asceticism. Asceticism means self-denial. According to Calvin, you're here on earth because God put you here. It's all about God's glory. God created the universe, according to Calvin, to glorify God. He didn't create you to glorify you. He created you to help create creation. So, for example, don't call a lot of attention to yourself. Do you remember what the pilgrims, what did they wear? They wore black and white. In other words, you weren't supposed to wear a lot of colors. Wearing a lot of colors means you're calling attention to yourself. Look at me, look at me, look how great I am. And Calvinism said, no, it's about God. Give the glory to God, not to yourself. Another thing they wore was wooden shoes. The idea was, well, wooden shoes might not be the most comfortable thing, but you're not here for your pleasure and comfort. You're here to do your calling. And if you think about their church, Calvinist churches, I don't know if you've ever been to New England, around Massachusetts and Maine and Rhode Island and those places, but Calvinist churches are very simple. It's a little white wooden building. It's not a cathedral. Catholics are famous for building large cathedrals, and cathedrals are very expensive, with lots of stained glass, lots of ornate sculptures, lots of marble and stuff like that, and they're expensive. And one of the things the Calvinists said is, we're not building huge buildings to call attention to ourselves. We are serving God, and all we need to do that is a little simple white structure. If you put all these three things together, you get some people that are very successful in business. Why do you think you'd be so successful in business if these were your core beliefs? If you decide to be a shoemaker, what kind of shoemaker would you be if you were a Calvinist shoemaker? Maybe you wouldn't, but you're serving other people in the colonies that aren't Calvinists too. So I'm not just saying what kind of shoes would you make, but what kind of shoemaker would you be? Right, you're Protestant, you're a Calvinist, but what I'm asking things like, what time would you get up in the morning? When would your shop open? Most shops open what, at 10 o'clock? When would your shop open? 6 in the morning. What time does it close? A lot of shops close at like 5 in the afternoon. When does your shop close? Like 9 or 10 at night. So you're there all day long making and selling shoes. In other words, you are very hardworking, So that helps you maybe succeed. What else might you do as a Calvinist that would help you be successful?
You be a little more frugal with like the size of your business.
Well, let's think about that. What should you do with the money if you make profit in your shoe? Let's say you decide I'm going to start a shoe shop because my calling is shoes. And you start making shoes and selling shoes and you're doing well. People like your shoes and they're buying them. What should you do with your profits according to these three principles? What would be the most Calvinist thing to do? If I've got $1,000 that I don't need for my family because my business put it in my pocket, what would a Calvinist with these three core beliefs say you should do with that money?
Make better shoes.
What did you say? Help others? No. A Calvinist would say that's not a good idea. Why is that not a good idea according to the beliefs we just said?
You get rich from your devotion and helps you.
So if I give her my money, then she might not find her calling because she's just going to take my $1,000 and she'll go buy stuff with it, but she hasn't found her calling. She needs to go make her own $1,000. That's the Protestant ethic. Don't take handouts from other people. Remember Claude Stanley in the movie we saw? He was Protestant. And one of his big core beliefs was, I'm not going to take handouts. I'm going to go get a job, even if it's way less money. So that's the ethic there. And no, you don't just hand out your money. Catholics say, give your money to the poor, tithe to the church. That would be another possibility. Maybe give your money to the church. But Calvinism says, no, the church doesn't need your money. We've got a white building. That's all we need. We don't need stained glass windows. We don't even need a priest. We don't need all this fancy stuff. So don't give your money to the church. What should you do with it?
Make better shoes.
Make better shoes, meaning what? How can you help your calling with the money?
Putting it back into your business.
Grow your business. Don't keep it small and frugal. Open another shoe shop. Open a chain of shoe shops. Become the shoe king of New England. Not just one little shop making money. So Calvinists say total devotion of your calling means the only the moral thing to do with the money you got from your calling is put it back into the calling. God made you a successful shoemaker, so you can do what? Be a successful shoemaker. He didn't give you money so you can buy fancy shoes or buy fancy hats and makeup. He blessed you with profits so you can grow your calling. And so in their view, that's the responsible thing to do. And so these guys, these Puritans in New England were very successful people. And America, as you know, is a successful capitalist economy. And the rest of the world has had to, in many ways, since the time of the Puritans, since the 1600s, 1602 is when they came, the rest of the world has had to become a little bit more like the Calvinists. Weber makes a distinction between purposive rationality and technical rationality. If you recall from earlier in this class, Weber was worried that too much rationality was harming our world. It was making us too much like robots, having to do things we don't want to do all the time because rationality demands it. We feel like we're in an iron cage. And remember I said he wrote this book after spending 7 years sitting by his window. I think what he was trying to understand was, why do I have to go get a job, for example, devote myself to a career, spend all my time on that career? He was supposed to be a lawyer. And certain kinds of law jobs are really boring and mind-numbing jobs. And I think Weber was asking himself, do I need to devote myself my whole life to this job where I'm going to spend most of my time doing stuff that's really boring, mind-numbing, really uninteresting to me? And I don't want to have to do that, but my society is telling me that's what you have to do. And he's asking, where did this come from? Now, he was in Germany. Germany is also a Protestant country that is known for hard work, but he was a guy that liked to drink beer, for example. He liked to party. He liked to do other things. He wasn't necessarily the kind of guy that wants to get up at 5 in the morning, get to his job at 6, and work until 10 at night every night. And so he was asking, how do we get to be a society where that's what most of us are expected to do? Purposive rationality, that is rationality that has a purpose. It's maximizing your gain. That's what rationality means. Maximize your gain. Minimize your loss. That's what a good little Protestant shoemaker is doing. I got to maximize the profits of my shoe company. I got to minimize my costs. And I got to keep maximizing my profits. And if I've got to grow and add more shoe shops to get even more profit, then that's what I got to do. But you're maximizing gain for a religious, let's say, a meaningful purpose. Basically, it means get rich for God. And if you are a Calvinist, that makes total sense. You wake up in the morning and you're saying, I got to get to work, not because I'm so excited about making shoes necessarily, but because I'm so excited about serving God. Every dollar I make is more glory for God. If you really believe in that, then it doesn't feel like a burden to get up in the morning. It feels like you're waking up with the sun, and the sun's got to do its job for God, and you got to do your job for God. And it's not a bad thing. It's not taking you away from anything. It's allowing you to be the little opening flower that God planted you to be. If you really believe in the meaningfulness of your work as serving this much larger purpose, then it doesn't feel like an imposition or a burden on you. And so the Calvinists, they believed in this lifestyle. They had core beliefs in it. It was their faith. And their lifestyle was based on their faith. Nowadays, though, many of us have to live like Calvinists. We have to get up in the morning. We have to maximize our wealth. We have to try and keep making as much profit as possible. But are we Calvinists? The Calvinism went away a long time ago. But why is it that other countries and other places have had to be like Calvinists? Because if you're a very successful business in a capitalist society, then other companies have to be like you or they're going to fail. I was in Spain my junior year of college, so I was looking at life like, what do I want to be when I grow up? What kind of lifestyle do I want to lead? Do I want to devote myself to work most of the time? Or are there other things in life that are interesting besides work? Like, fun and other things. Spain is a Catholic country. So they were never Protestant in the ways that Calvinists are. And Spain, while I was there, I don't know how much today still, but Spain, for example, has something called the siesta. Everybody know what a siesta is? Right around lunchtime, you go home. So I was living at a Spanish family's house, and I would go to school all day. And at lunchtime, you come home around 12 o'clock. Your senora made you a nice big lunch, because that was their main meal of the day. It was lunchtime. And you would eat that, and you'd be all full, and then you'd go to sleep for 2 hours. And then you'd wake up at like 4 in the afternoon, and you'd go back to work for a while, till like 10 at night. And I kind of liked this lifestyle, like work for a few hours in the morning, come home, eat a big meal, sleep, and then go out and do more work. And it was a nice, pleasant lifestyle. And it makes sense for Spain, because Spain's really hot during the afternoon, so in the spring and summer. So going to sleep while it's hot is better than working. But Spain, while I was there, began to say, we can't keep taking siestas. Spain needs to get rid of siestas. Why do you think Spain was talking about getting rid of siestas?
You can't work as much if you're taking a nap.
And why so? But it always worked for Spain for hundreds of years, so why now do they suddenly say, yeah, it's because we're not as productive, but why are they worried about not being productive? Because you're competing with Germany and America and England and France. And they were pointing out, well, they're not taking naps in the middle of the day. Those Americans work really hard. They work all day long, and they're making a lot of money over there. And if our Spanish companies are letting everyone take naps in the afternoon, well, we're not going to be able to compete with American companies, and we'll get bought by them and owned by them. And so Spain was in the process in 1989 when I was there of becoming part of the capitalist global economy, and realizing if we're going to compete in this global economy, we got to live more like those Protestants in America do, and England and Germany. And even in America, New England was where these Puritans settled, but there were a lot of other people coming to America in the colonies and later. But these Puritans were such successful business people that if you wanted to compete, if you wanted to open your own shoe shop and you want to compete with the Puritans, you better wake up at 6 in the morning. You better keep your shop open all day. You better reinvest your profits back in your business, or you're not going to be able to compete. So Weber's making the case here that this little religious group that settled America 400 years ago created a lifestyle that now pretty much the whole world has to live by. And it's not something inevitable in capitalism that we would have a world where everybody has to devote their whole life to making money. But if we don't really believe in Calvinism, but you're faced with a world where I have to get up every morning and devote my whole time to my job and invest my profits back in my business, if that's the way we all have to operate now, and even if we're not the business owner, we have to do the things the business owner wants us to, like work real hard and put our family second and other things second. What really matters is your job. And we're told we're bad people if we go home to take care of our sick kid. You better put your job first. You better serve your employer, we say in America. But if that ever seems to you like, I don't know if I want to define myself by my job, like my whole life is my job, my whole time is my job. I don't know if you've ever said to yourself, whether you like that or not. Me personally, one of the reasons I got into sociology is I asked, what kind of world do we live in where your job is the most important thing and other things aren't supposed to matter as much? But he calls that technical rationality. And now it's like get rich to get rich. In other words, there's no larger meaning or purpose in it. And if we look at the richest people in our world, we sometimes ask, well, are they so much happier and fulfilled and better? Is the billionaire running for president so much better person than the rest of us? I don't know how you think about that. But anyway, that's the kind of world they've created, is getting rich for wealth's sake, rather than getting rich to serve this larger, meaningful purpose. So it's an interesting argument that the capitalist world we live in isn't just an economic system. Marx just said, well, that's how the system works. The system requires us to live this way. It's just a structural fact of capitalism that it needs to grow. But Weber is making a different argument, that it's a cultural belief system we're living under that tells us we should grow, we should get rich, we should work hard, and if we're not doing those things, we're somehow lazy or bad people or not doing things right. And we could ask ourselves as a culture, is that the only belief system to follow? Are there other values that might matter as much as rationality and maximizing wealth? But anyway, that's the world we have, and he says it comes from a belief system, not from a structural change. So Marx, we said, Marx defined himself as a materialist. It's the system of capitalism that causes us to live the way we do. Or the mode of production is what causes the beliefs we have. But Weber's more of an idealist. He's saying it's the ideas people have that guide them to live the way they do. And so really, the Protestant ethic, this idea that we're supposed to work hard, and if we're not working hard, we're bad people, that's one of the primary driving beliefs of our current capitalist world. And he refers to it as a kind of rationalism without limits. If your whole goal is to make wealth for wealth's sake, well, then no amount is enough. And impoverishing other people at your own, for your own benefit makes sense. And, if we make wealth the main thing, a lot of other things get left behind. But, so his is more of a cultural argument, saying it's people's beliefs that guide their actions, and their actions guide the things they create. And so maybe you can see, too, why he is a founding father of symbolic interactionism, because he's really saying it's the ideas in people's head that matter more than things like the economic system that they have. And in fact, the economic systems they have are the result of the ideas they have in their heads. So he's giving much more weight to ideas than to material realities as the determinant of how people act and what they believe and how they behave. So that's, I can see you're not really with me here. Maybe it's because every time I start talking about something that happened more than 5 minutes ago, most Americans are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And we're talking about things 100 years ago, but hopefully you can see that it is relevant in the sense that today many of us ask, well, can I be happy in a job? Am I going to be happy devoting myself to a single career? Is it even possible to have a single career nowadays? And am I happy devoting myself mainly to work as opposed to other things human beings can do, like families, like pleasure, like creativity? For a lot of people who are creative artists, a lot of people say, well, what I really love to do is make art. But in our society, if you're not making money, then you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So there's many artistically inclined people that say, well, since I can't make money doing art, I guess I'll have to spend my life doing something I don't really like doing. And, I don't know if that sounds tragic to you, but that's what we're getting at here. Is the system we have the only one possible, or is it a reflection of beliefs that we don't even have anymore? It's like a system that was created based on beliefs that most people don't necessarily share. So anyway, that's what I have to say about the Founding Fathers' views on religion. Your textbook goes into much more other things about religion, like if we were to look at America today and ask, well, how religious are people? How spiritual are they? How much church do they attend? And there's some interesting differences there that you can pay attention to your book. I don't have much to lecture on about it, but I'm hoping these what's called classical theory, these earlier classical theories of Marx, Weber, and Durkheim, I think they're still relevant today because the basic issues they're raising are still ones we're debating as a society. Let's bring it up to the election. America, and one big group in America are what are called evangelicals. And a lot of them generally vote GOP. They vote for the Republican Party. But the current guy, Trump, is the candidate, and he's not necessarily religious at all. And so there's a question of, do these evangelicals support Trump? Evangelicals are the closest thing, I would say, to the kind of Calvinist view, traditional Puritan beliefs in America. Mitt Romney, by the way, ran for president a few years ago. He's Mormon. Mormons generally support the GOP, but the Mormons, from what I can tell, don't love Trump. And Utah is one of those states that's not sure, is it going to vote Trump or not vote Trump? And the Mormons, I don't know this for a fact, but Mormonism, if you look at the belief system of Mormonism, it comes very close to the Calvinism that Weber analyzed. Mormons put a very high value on hard work, devoting yourself to your calling, not calling much attention to yourself as an individual person. Mormon churches are pretty austere in how they look. They have some gold and stuff like that, but they're pretty basic. And I think of Mitt Romney, one of the things he said when he was running for president is he made a distinction between makers and takers. He said some people in America are makers. They're the ones that have companies and they employ people. And then there's the other people that are the takers. And he was implying that people who get public assistance, who get help from the government and things like that, they're just taking from the people who make. It's a pretty Calvinist way of looking at things. It's not a Marxist way of looking at things, because Karl Marx would say, Mitt Romney, you don't make, you just invest money. And investing money, you're making profit, but you're taking profit from the workers who made that wealth. You didn't sit in the factory making the stuff, you just took the wealth. So anyway, but that distinction between makers and takers is an interesting one. And Mitt Romney was saying, that's why we need to cut welfare and get people off public assistance and make people responsible for themselves. Personal responsibility was a key idea there. But interestingly enough, Mitt Romney is one of the biggest critics of Trump and doesn't support him. And I think he's even said, you should vote for Hillary maybe. And so he is somebody that thinks that if we really want America to live up to its core values, that Trump wouldn't be somebody that reflects that in his view. On the other hand, we also, another big religious group in America are Catholics. Catholics are associated with, in America, what we call white ethnics. Evangelical religion and Mormonism are associated more with what are called white, Anglo, Saxon, and then Protestants. But I would think of Mormonism as a version of Protestantism that developed here in America after we were founded by the Puritans. I sometimes wonder if they are in fact the descendants of the Calvinists. There aren't many people going around saying they're Calvinist anymore, but there's a big group of Mormons that used to be on the East Coast and now are in Utah, also looking for religious liberty and ending up in Utah doing that. But so the Mormons are kind of the extension of what Weber's talking about. Catholics are Christians too, but they generally came to America more as immigrants in the late 19th century and 20th century. When I say white ethnics, we mean white people who are now considered white, but aren't part of the Anglo-Saxon. They didn't come from England. They are like Italians and Irish and Greek and Russian. And there's different kinds of Catholics because there's Eastern Orthodox and then there's traditional Catholicism. And a lot of the immigrants that came over to this country as working people to come work in the factories owned by white Anglo-Saxon people were from a different religion. And when we look at American politics, sometimes the Democratic Party is more supported by white ethnic groups, working people, not because of their religion so much as because of their working class position in society. But some of the big issues we used to say is this country that there are values voters, and their values voters are based oftentimes on their religious beliefs. So what do you think are some of the values that religious voters might be concerned about when it comes to the election? What would be some issues, do you think?
Well, for starters, Trump's not religious in general.
Well, okay, but specific issues aside from the candidates, what would be values voters? What are the issues that they look for when they're deciding on candidates? Can you think of any political issues that really have their roots or they bear on religious questions that different religions may have different rules about?
Abortion.
Abortion is one of the big ones. How do you feel about abortion? And that has complicated this picture I'm talking about here. Catholics are especially opposed to abortion, and yet for working reasons, economic reasons, they often vote Democratic. But for religious reasons, some strongly conservative Catholics are very much in favor of the GOP. Antonin Scalia, who's a recent Supreme Court justice who died, he was Catholic. He's from the Italian working class background. So he's a white ethnic from Italian background, but he was never Democrat. He was much more Republican for values reasons. Abortion, and what's another big one, do you think?
Capital punishment.
Capital punishment, well, I was really going to get into marriage here. Marriage issues like divorce and gay marriage are other big values issues that often come down to your religion. Depending on your religion, Protestants tend to think divorce is okay. In fact, one of the reasons they're called Protestants, or when did Protestantism become Protestantism? When it broke off from Catholicism. Why did it break off from Catholicism? Because the King of England wanted to get divorced. And the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, said, you can't get divorced, that's not allowed. And the King of England said, well, then I'll start my own religion. And then it'll be allowed. And so they created Protestantism in England. And so, in the western part of Europe. And so that division still exists in some ways. And Protestants tend to be less worried about, divorce. But a lot of them are anti-abortion as well. So Catholics sometimes have to choose where they stand on this issue. So do evangelicals, but a lot of them strongly vote conservative and vote Republican. I don't know how far capital punishment, where people come down on that. I think, I'm not exactly sure what the religions say about that. I believe the Pope and some other strongly religious people are opposed to the idea that human beings get to decide who dies or lives, that that's God's decision, not humans. And so, but I don't know. Some Catholics are very opposed to capital punishment. Some are in favor of it. Same with evangelicals. Other groups, obviously, in this country aren't just evangelicals and Catholics. Other big groups include, Muslims and Jews and Buddhists and Sikhs. And your book breaks it down and I think gives you figures on what percentages of our population are these different groups. You hear a lot, America is a Christian country. That's not an accurate statement in my view. The Puritans were the first colonists that started Jamestown and some of the early colonies, but a lot of the early colonists weren't Calvinists, especially the children of the Calvinists. I mean, the founding fathers like Jefferson and Washington and some of those guys weren't Calvinist anymore. They called themselves deists and other kinds of religion. So to say that America was founded by the Calvinists. It's sort of true and sort of not true. And in any case, we define ourselves now as a secular country. Secular country means we don't have an official religion. We're not a theocracy. A theocracy is you have one religion, the official religion of your country, and we define ourselves as a secular nation with no official religion. Religion's your private matter, not an official state matter. But again, we're seeing some of the cracks in trying to create a society where everyone gets their own religion and somehow we're all supposed to work together when we all have very different core beliefs. And that's kind of what Durkheim was getting at. If you don't have shared faith, in a sense, or shared collective representations of big things like who are we, where are we going, what are we all about, then it's hard to work together in things like institutions and schools and elections and government and stuff like that.
But wouldn't, like, a shared belief that you're allowed to have whatever religion you want would be the...
Okay, so some people say America has a civil religion. That we do. There is a kind of Americanism that we all sort of believe in. I believe that. That's one of the reasons we organized this October Voter Fest, is to say, well, we might seem very divided as a country and ready to kill each other, but there are certain things we do believe in, like you should be able to get up at a mic and say what you think, that you should be able to, enjoy some, barbecue chicken in the fall. I don't know, I'm just saying there are things Americans do agree on that are our core values, things like free speech and democracy and equality and core values, you could say, that we share as a country and that are supposed to make us feel like we can work together. But and I agree with you that we should be emphasizing those similarities, and that's one reason I get upset with our current political coverage and the debates is they only ever talk about the ways we're different from each other and the things we hate each other about and the things that divide us, and it should be an opportunity for us to celebrate the core things we do believe. And rituals, by the way, rituals are a really important part of religious practice. The only way groups can reinforce with each other that they really do believe the things they say they believe is to get together and have these rituals where we remember and celebrate those beliefs and those symbols. And so, we mentioned the Hopi Indians earlier in this class. The rain dance, even if it doesn't bring the rain, has important functions like helping Hopi Indians maintain themselves as a group and their core beliefs. And I would agree with you, if America is going to have a working social solidarity where we're connected to each other and willing to work together and not kill each other, then we have to have more rituals of where we remind each other what are our core values, what are our core symbols. I don't have the, you happen to be in the class, John, Sociology 2, that's helping to put on this fest that we're having, the October Voter Fest. But that's what you guys chose to call it, was the October Voter Fest. It's a little interesting choice because Oktoberfests are really a German tradition, not an American tradition. But we're calling it the October Voter Fest. We're not serving any beer, but that's part of the German ritual, is to have beer on Oktoberfest. But what our poster that not going to show you right now, it has certain symbols on it that are meant to unite people in an almost religious way. Like what? The stars and stripes. Whenever you see the red, white, and blue, and the stars and the stripes, those are the kinds of symbols that are supposed to make you feel connected at the level of your heart, at the level of your collective effervescence to other people, where we say, hey, we're all connected, we share this value, we love that symbol. Just the act of voting and wearing your little sticker, going to your booth and doing the voting and having the little I voted sticker. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, whatever. We all kind of look at somebody that has one of those and we say, good job, you did what you're supposed to in America, you followed the norms. There are norms and rights and wrongs, rules about how we do things or don't do things, connected with voting and connecting with the ritual of voting. And so those are, you could see all of this as part of the civil religion of America. When I say civil religion, we mean government, kind of. It's government sanctioned, but it's not not a faith. It doesn't depend on belief in unseen things like heaven after you die or a creator that is there that you can't see. It's just about real things like, that we can see and touch, like voting booths and flags and stuff like that. So in that sense, it's a civil religion, not an actual religion. But it serves some of the same functions as other religions have, which is tie us together, feel connected, orient us, make us understand why are we doing this, because it leads to that, and that kind of thing. So, but I do feel as a country right now, I don't know where we stand with this. How many of you watched the debate last night? Quite a few. It's a not that many. It's a popular debate partly because it has some very famous people in it. But part of America's problem for the last 20, 30 years, if you ask me, is people not participating much in politics. And if we don't do our rituals, like the Hopi Indian, then we'll cease to be a people. And so if people don't vote, don't go do the rituals, don't reaffirm their faith in the value of these things, then we don't really have them anymore. And sometimes I think we don't have America anymore, but it's just a simulacrum of it. I started to think that last night as I was watching the debate. I'm like, is this like the best reality TV show ever? Like maybe they're just acting. Maybe they're pretending to run for president and it's like all set up with the script and everything. I don't know. It looked that way at times. I hope not. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist and think that some people are in a room back there going, okay, Donald, you say this, and then Hillary, you say this, and the American people are all going to tune in. But it seemed that way at times, like a staged circus to me.
I mean, they do have that debate prep where some of their answers kind of seem canned.
Well, yeah.
Well, if she says this is what you're going to say. If you say that, that's what you're
Exactly. Well, even if it wasn't planned out, at this point, there's almost a script to how debates go, or you could have written the answers. Like, if she says this, here's what Donald should say. And he said, so it's like kind of that gets to symbolic interactions in the way we're just repeating dramas we've already seen. But anyway, any other thoughts on any of this? Religion? No. They're big topics that make people not want to talk. So I don't know what to say about that. I guess I'm not going to move on to my, yeah?
I think that you said that it's a civil religion kind of says a lot. Something I never really thought about. It's the fact that generally when you talk to any American, they kind of all have the same core beliefs and norms and things. I mean, yeah, we still have stuff to divide us, and like you said, that's what we focus on. But inevitably, people still believe that we should be involved in other countries and whether or not there's tyranny going on there, and we should fight for our country and try to prevent people from acquiring dangerous things when they're dangerous to other countries.
Maybe, yeah. We could debate those, I think. I was getting more in terms of core beliefs. It's more like core norms of how you should be as a person. Like, should you vote or not?
Yeah.
I don't think there'd anybody but see, it's so great I don't vote. I just don't care. I don't see anybody like advertising that fact. Whereas if you say, I vote, I care about politics, it's seen as a virtuous thing. It's sometimes called Republican virtue, not meaning the Republican Party, but meaning if you live in a republic, if you live in a place where you're supposed to help make things happen, like vote on things and pay attention, that there's certain virtues, meaning good behavior. And we tend to think people who pay attention to the news, follow things, who are well informed, who vote on things, who follow the laws and things like that, that those are all virtues. That means you're upholding the republic and doing what you're supposed to do. And people who don't do those things, in fact, the word idiot, by the way, comes from Greek. And it means the people who didn't participate in the republic. Greece was the first democracy. And that democracy said, since you're a Greek free citizen, you get to come and vote on things. And there were some people that were too lazy and wanted to go drink wine or whatever. And in Greek society at the time, they said, well, if you're somebody who can vote and doesn't, well, you're an idiot. And you could say, in some ways, America has become a little bit idiotic in the sense that people don't want to participate, or they haven't for the last 20, 30 years. And if you don't participate, then you may get what one movie called an idiocracy. In other words, if you don't participate, you may get idiotic society and idiotic policies. But anyway, so that's all my plea to say you should pay attention, you should participate. If you're not really being a good American. And if you're not being a good American, you could ask yourself, well, why? Why are you here then? Some of the worst Americans, in terms of what I'm talking about, actually voting and actually participating, are the ones that want to close our borders and keep anyone out who's not a good American. But are they good Americans? Are they doing the Republican virtues? I don't know. Are you? So anyway, that's a good plea to you to vote. I guess I'm going to let you a little early because we need to move on to the next topic, which is symbolic interactionism. And we're going to be talking about race and gender. Normally we would go into gender as the next thing. I don't know if we will, because on Wednesday next week you have to, I think what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to ask them to play a video. Hopefully this is okay with you. We normally watch a video when it comes to gender. It's called Tough Guys 2. And it doesn't make sense really to have you all sit here watching it. But I think what we'll do is we'll go to the open mic. I'll have them play it on the screen here, so the people at home will be able to watch that. The people at home, you're also encouraged very much to come to the campus for the October Voter Fest on Wednesday the 19th from 2 to 9 p.m. Anytime in there you can come to it. And but it'll also, this video will have played on our screen. That means I'm going to ask you all to watch Tough Guys 2 from your computers at home. You'll just go onto Canvas and go onto Pages and watch Tough Guys 2. So is that going to work out? That you'll watch the video on a computer on your own time, but we'll spend next Wednesday's class over at the theater. Does that make sense? I'll remind you about it later. Okay, see you. you.